Today I'm going to talk to you about the importance of meditation, not just for a person who uniquely is interested in meditation, but for every living organism. But particularly for the human organism, there is a need to meditate. And the reason for this is because the human organism, separate to all other animals and creatures on the planet, has a complex way of thinking. We have invented language and we have taught and learnt how to think, taught the young people how to think, and as a young person we were taught how to think. And not only were we taught how to think, but what to think. And why this separates us from other animals in a detrimental way actually is because we learn to think about ourselves, and in thinking we learn a way to create an actually imagined experience of being separate, of either being separate to the world that we think about outside of us, or being separate to the person that we think about as ourselves. Or more importantly, on top of that, is we create this imaginary experience of separation between the mind and the body. And this imaginary separation is created through thinking. As soon as there's thinking about, particularly about ourselves, we are in that moment having this very unusual separation, unnatural separation from that which we're thinking about. And you will feel it. When you think about yourself, it's as though you're thinking about something other than the action of thinking. In other words, there's the action of thinking and there's the thing that you think about. And this is an unnatural state. To think is something learned, not something we've been born with. So why is this problematic is essentially because of the separation that it creates. Then we can learn to separate through our thinking. We can separate from our day-to-day living experience. By thinking about our day-to-day living experience, we find ourselves desensitizing to the immediate experience of that. And the immediate experience of that is ongoing at all times, every moment of our existence. And where is that but in the living organism that we are, in the body of ourselves? And in the body of ourselves, as we are, there is this ongoing lived experience of ourself and of ourself in relationship, in a sensitive relationship, a felt relationship with everything around us. For example, every sense organ works on feeling. So when you hear, that's a feeling, a vibration in your ears that is actually being processed in that process of hearing. And that hearing is not separate to what you're listening to. You can't separate it at that point at which you know it as a lived experience, which is inside your ears. And feeling that, feeling the sensation of what we call sound, we are in that moment hearing the sound we're listening to. And in there, inside of us, in our ears, what is outside is known to us inside. And there we have an absolute experiential connection, an interconnection with our outside world through our senses. And so it goes for every other sense organ, and in fact every cell in our body. And so this sensory existence is the way in which we are designed, the way in which we are meant to be. As a thought-based existence is definitely not. We have imagined this, we have created this, we have invented this, and we misuse it. Not necessarily intentionally, we've learned to misuse it habitually. through avoiding any sorts of discomforts that we may have. So the natural meditation of the body is very important, because what it is it's discovering how the body itself is in a perpetual state of sensing, a perpetual state of the lived experience of itself, known to itself simply because of sensation, simply because of the feelings of itself. And that body known to itself, that living creature known to itself in this immediate, inseparable way, is that I know I exist because I feel myself whilst existing. And I can't separate these two things because they're not separate. I feel myself so long as I exist. If I stop existing, I no longer feel myself. And so the feeling is the life of me, and the life of me is known as the feeling. And the feeling is just another word to describe the life of me. And to know the life of me is to feel it. Now, when I overthink, or when I use thinking to think about myself or any condition I'm in, I find I'm able to disassociate from that feeling. And to some degree we do. Anytime we describe sensation mentally, we are actually changing the reality of the immediate nature of that sensation so far as we are able to experience it. And we change it according to our viewpoint of that sensation in thinking about it. And so we no longer are actually experiencing the immediacy of that sensation as it actually is, but we are experiencing the result of our thoughts about it, which is a completely different experience. The two aren't the same. So we actually prevent ourselves from experiencing ourselves and knowing ourselves as we actually are simply by thinking about ourselves. So whatever we think about ourselves, whatever aspect of ourselves we think about, we fail in capturing what it is we're thinking about in those thoughts. So the thinking creates a separation from reality, a separation from the reality of our own existence into a thought-induced experience of that existence, which is actually not of that existence anymore, but just purely the product of our thinking. So we live in this appearance to ourselves of a duality between thinking and the body, mind and body. And this is actually our own creation, our own invention. It's not a reality, it's an appearance. So a reality, I would say, is something that exists whether you think about it or not. So it exists of its own right, whereas an appearance or an imagining exists only whilst you are imagining it, only whilst you are thinking it. And as soon as you stop imagining it, as soon as you stop thinking it, it cannot continue, because it is only the product and the continuation and the result of that thinking. So why is this very important? Is because we're interfering with the natural health process, the natural correction process, the natural recovery process of the living organism that we are when we're thinking about ourselves. Because when we think about ourselves, we divide our experience of ourselves away from the actual experience of ourselves into thoughts about ourselves, and that becomes predominant. And the more predominant that becomes, the more we desensitize to the way we actually are. And if we're not feeling the way we actually are, particularly when we've been disturbed, or there's some sort of harm or damage or effect from life. In fact, it doesn't have to be harm and damage. Any effect from life, even the effect from life of being tired, that's not harmful. That's just an effect. It's a natural effect. So the effect from life of being tired, if you become too involved in thinking and doing, then you can actually override and disassociate from that natural feeling inside of you of being tired. But the tiredness is still there, and the tiredness is not being felt. And if the tiredness is not being felt, then the tiredness is not recovering within that experience of being felt. When you feel tired, Your whole body responds to that, and in that response, you sleep or you rest on every level. When I say on every level, I simply mean every cell in your body is allowed to rest in that tiredness and recover from the fatigue. But when you override a tiredness or any other sensation of your existence, you disassociate from that unintentionally into overthinking, and that means into using thinking in a way that's not intended, and that is to use thinking to override our actual condition. Our actual condition is known to us only as the sensation of that condition and of ourselves in that condition, both being exactly the same thing. Of ourselves in that condition. So the natural meditation of the body is that the body is perpetually in this state of sensing. The body is not naturally thinking. Yeah? The body is in this perpetual state of sensation, which over time, a sensation will produce the thinking that expresses that sensation and the information in that sensation. But what I'm talking about today is not so much that, but more talking about the actual significance of the natural meditation of the body, which is to live in the immediate sense of our own ongoing sensory, sensational, lived experience of ourselves, going through the various fluctuations of how our energy levels, conditions, and so forth are. Now, when we feel something, we know it. When we don't feel it, we don't know it. So when we override our tiredness, as a simple example, by thinking about things that are unrelated to that, then in doing that, what happens is the tiredness is not recovering anymore. The tiredness is now just the way we are being ignored. Now, we ignore many, many ways in which we are throughout our life, and in ignoring those, these become unprocessable sensations in our body. They just get stuck, if you like. They're on hold, waiting for the attention that they need. Aspects of ourselves, parts of ourselves need attention all the time, but the attention is automatic when we're living in the lived sensation of ourselves as any other animal is. And the only animal that isn't is the human animal, who has learnt to think in a very complex language in a way that we can think about life and imagine that we think about ourselves, and in this way create a separation from ourselves and life. So inevitably what's going to happen with this separation, which is a problem we have in the world today, through thinking, we are able to disassociate from ourselves, and therefore disassociate from our actual physical condition, and our physical condition becomes, over time, our mental condition. So the sensation of the body precedes the thinking of what we call the mind. And so the sensation of the body always comes first, and without that sensation of the body being known, we create this separation between the sensation of the body and the thought process. And when that happens, we no longer are thinking based on sensitivity to what we are, but we are actually more susceptible to thinking the thoughts of other people. In other words, the thoughts that come to us from outside of us, and following along with those, creating a very separate existence to the one that is ours, into the one that has been manufactured by society as a whole bunch of ideas and a whole lot of ways in which we're supposed to live up to and be, which we always fail in, because we can't be other than what we are naturally. So this separation from the sensation leads to the breakdown of that interconnectedness of feeling throughout our physical system, and this feeling, our own lived existence, on an ongoing basis throughout our life. This ensures that the body is in a state of constantly rectifying any effects of life along the way, the effects that are felt as a disturbance to the sensations in the body. And the disturbance of the sensations in the body is the point at which we can rectify everything. However, if we overlook that because of being disconnected from that into overthinking and thinking about other things, and distracting from these sensations inside of us, then we start to deteriorate. And that sensation, for example, the sensation of tiredness that I used, we will simply become more tired. And other problems will occur, other physical problems, and eventually from those physical problems, the psychological problems will also occur. And so we end up with mental and physical health deterioration due to ignoring and overriding and desensitizing to ourselves as a body, and creating this imagined separation of ourselves into a mind, soul, or spirit, or something other than the body. Perhaps we could put it down to just a separation between sensing and thinking. And once that separation between sensing and thinking occurs, our thinking can just run away, and absolutely take us over. And that becomes like a replacement of our lived experience. Unfortunately, though, that thinking is not alive. It's just a repetition of dead words. And so it isn't a very good replacement of the lived experience. And it doesn't have a self-corrective capacity. Only the body has a self-corrective capacity. Yeah, so the self-corrective capacity of the body is that when the sensations of disturbances and so on are going on in the body, the whole body gets involved. The whole body responds to that. And in response to that, whatever you are needing at that time to recover, you go into the state chemically, and even the energy levels change according to what the need is of the living organism at any given moment in its life to resolve a particular problem. Ignoring that leads to a build-up of these problems in our body, and memories and effects from life that we hold and store as tensions and dysfunctions in the flesh of the body. In fact, in every cell of the body. And that every cell meaning blood, everything. Every cell of the body is affected, and the change of its frequency, its vibrations, and the way in which it's functioning is affected by not recovering in this natural way on a moment by moment, day by day basis, because of not being allowed to recover, because of the disassociation between body and thinking. Now, this is also a problem with longevity, and this is something that the longevity gurus of the world very rarely, I've never heard them actually bring this up, because I think they don't really realize that the most important factor of longevity to any human being is that you're not going to be that interested in living for a long time if life is hell for you. And so why would life become hell for you? Because this can happen when you're physically and mentally deteriorated. And being physically and mentally deteriorated, you're well and truly into a life of suffering. And so this suffering is only increased through this separative thought process that thinks about pain, that thinks about illness, that thinks about problems, that therefore is in reaction to the way in which we are on a moment by moment basis. And only in that reaction, we're only separating from ourselves all over again into the product of that reaction, which is an exaggeration on whatever we are reacting to in reality, in the reality of our own existence at that time. So when we react to ourselves, we react to a physical or mental condition that's going on for us, we react to an external situation that's going on for us, and that reaction produces and is the product of massive distress about things. So mentally, we disassociate from the true nature of something by reacting to it, because by reacting to it, we produce our own reactionary response to that, which is completely different to the way it really is, to the way whatever it is we're reacting to really is, or would be if we weren't reacting to it. So we change our experience of life through this reactionary process of thinking, and we change our experience of life from how life really is into what it's like to react to life. It's quite unrelated, quite separate to life. So longevity is something that is difficult for most people to grasp, because one, they don't don't necessarily want to, if they're miserable, why would they want to live on forever? Other than just simply fearing coming to an end. But, and there is this inherent nature in any living organism that is to live, no matter what, to simply keep living. So if we're going to keep living, let's do it well. Let's do it in a way that is enjoyable, that isn't a suffering of misery and breakdown all the way along, or as you become older. So aging is not necessarily deterioration. Deterioration can happen at any point in our age. And so deterioration is predominantly the product of disassociation, or the product of separating ourselves from one thing into two things, from a living sensory body into a body and a mind, or a body and a thought process. So we become so caught up in our thought process, i.e. our personas, the way in which we think ourselves to be and think of ourselves as, these are quite separate to the way we actually are. And these personas aren't necessarily one per body either. You can have many personas, depending on the sorts of traumas and so forth you've been through. So the thought process becomes very problematic when we use it as a way to create an experience of ourselves which is an alternative and a falsity to the one we are actually having as a living organism, which is the only true experience of ourselves there is. And so, because this is untainted by our interpretations of that, our many thought interpretations of our biases and our preferences that change the way we experience the way we are. Change the way we experience the way we are, not change the way we are. So dropping that back into the sensations of the body, we discovered that by being with the sensations of the body, we're actually in the meditation of the body. And this is the natural meditation of any living organism. In a sense, I don't even have to call it meditation. I go so far as to say it's a natural state, where in that natural state, we're simply in a process of perpetual self-correction, perpetual recovery from any effects on life from the time we're born to the time we die. And so this meditation is very important to each and every one of us. We may not realize it is until we hear about the benefits, until we recognize the need. And everybody can understand this need, I think, in time, is that if I don't know how to stay in direct contact with my own lived experience, then I separate, I disassociate, I numb out, I lose touch with myself. If I lose touch with myself, this means I lose the feeling of myself, This means I lose the sense of myself. And the sense of myself and the feeling of myself is unique to me. My thoughts about myself is not unique to me at all. We all think the same thoughts about ourselves because we've all been given the same thoughts to think about ourselves from our cultures and our societies and our upbringing and so on. But beneath all that thinking about ourselves, and before any thinking about ourselves, there is ourselves as we truly are. There is the actual life of what we are and the direct and immediate lived experience of what we are. This is where we find our sensitivity returning and our wholeness returning, where we actually find when we sit still, what we start to discover is that we are already sensing, that it's already there. So it's not something to achieve, it's something to simply recognize as already happening, and that our thinking, our overthinking, and the occupation with our thinking has only caused us to overlook that fact, to desensitize to that fact. So just sitting still for a little while, not concerning ourselves with our thinking at all we have to do is feel the way it feels inside of us. Not think about it, but feel it as a physical sensation and as it actually is. And each one of us will be in a different condition. Each one of us are in a different condition to one another, and each one of us are in a different condition in ourselves this moment to what we were yesterday. And so the condition is always changing. This is completely natural. There is no one state to attain. There is no one preferred state to be in. The state you are in is the state you're in because of the effects of life that you are feeling inside of you. Now, feeling those effects is absolutely essential in order to recover from those effects. But if you just get involved in trying to feel better than you feel in those effects, trying to reach certain ideal states of bliss, happiness, joy, or enlightenment, then what are you going to do? You're just going to separate from yourself all over again. And it's just another form of a disassociation. And actually another form of self-ignorance, because that's not how your self is. Knowing yourself as you are is the end of self-ignorance. Thinking you know yourself because of the product of the experience of yourself that you created through thinking about yourself, that's ignorance. That's an ignorance because you think you know yourself, and what it is you're referring to as knowing is the product of your thinking. So if you think negatively about yourself all day, you're going to feel quite negative. This is going to be the product of your thinking. If you think positive all day, you're going to feel the product of your positive thinking. Both of these are delusional states. Neither of them, even though they're the product of the thinking that's affected the chemistry of the body and produced a certain experience in yourself, the fact that you had to produce that experience, it shows that you're disassociated from the sensory state that you were in before you started doing all that. And that's the state you need. The way you are naturally already as a result of the effects of living your life, that will be different every time you revisit that, or every moment of being in that. That will be different. And that is absolutely necessary that you're with that. So none of these states are incorrect. None of these states are wrong. Logically, how can they be wrong if they are the way you've been affected? So the way you've been affected is completely normal. Nobody is beyond these effects. And these effects are not problematic if you're not in reaction to them. And they're actually automatically resolvable if you are in the sense of them. So this is the natural corrective process of any living organism, is to be affected and to resolve those effects, to be affected and resolve those effects. And those effects can be quite extreme. Injuries, trauma, harm, and so forth can be done to any organism, and that organism will be able to heal itself from those things, but in a way that we cannot grasp mentally. The healing process is not understood mentally. It doesn't need to be understood mentally. It is something that only the body can do, and the body does it automatically. And the essential point of activating any healing process is to pull back from this imagined artificial disassociation between a body and your thought processes, and just be in the feeling of that body. Recognize your existence there as and in that body, inside the sensations that you are made up of today. And feeling those activates the healing process. It activates the entire bodily, the full body, the whole body response to a need at any one or singular or many points in your body that are in need. And that feeling of that brings about an activation of something that's been deactivated because of you ignoring it and disassociating from it, numbing out to it, into thinking about yourself. Come back to the sensation of yourself, and once you're used to being back in that sensation of yourself, which is just, you have it there already, you don't have to achieve it, you just have to feel it as it is in your body right now. And at that point, you reactivate the whole life living response of you to yourself, within yourself, and that is how we will prolong our well-being and the longevity of our life to its natural duration in death. Now, this is very important. This is the essential ingredient for longevity, but healthy and contentment and fulfillment in that longevity. So the health and the fulfillment is not because of a particular state. That is because of taking care of all the states that we go through, having been affected by life and continually being affected by life on a day-by-day basis. Feeling those, feeling the sense of those, keeps the body activated to itself, responsive to itself, and in a state of perpetual recovery until eventually that body wears out and dies. Thanks for joining me today. If this talk resonated with you or helped you in any way at all, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the talk with your friends so that they can get the benefit as well. Okay, bye for now.